Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode number 119 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's episode, I wanted to talk about what to do if you've thought about getting hormone testing to figure out if that's what's driving your skin rash issues. And this whole topic actually was inspired by a listener's question. Florence wrote in and asked, I want to get some functional testing run. I'm thinking about doing hormone testing because I've seen a lot of people talk about it. What are your thoughts on getting hormone testing to get answers for my skin? In order to answer this question, it's important for you to understand that there is a hierarchy of systems in the body. Some are lower down on the list or more foundational, while others are higher up and impacted directly by those systems that are beneath them. It's sort of like being flashback to grade school and high school and thinking about the difference between basic math versus calculus. You wouldn't just go from basic math to calculus. There's a lot of steps in between the two. And if you started with calculus, you would be totally and completely lost and probably not be able to take much meaningful action on figuring out and solving problems because you're missing so many of the other pieces underneath or before you get to those calculus problems. This concept is not the first time this has ever been introduced on the Healthy Skin Show. In fact, Dr. Jolene Brighton, who talks a ton about hormones, discussed this in both of the episodes that I interviewed her on, episode 5 and episode 84. Those you can go back and check out. I highly recommend it. Ultimately, we need to be mindful of this whole process because hormones aren't foundational. Let me repeat that. Hormones are not foundational. They're higher up on the hierarchy and thus impacted by the things that are more foundational. So yes, they can play a role in many different aspects of your health. And yes, they can trigger or contribute to rashes. But if your hormones are off, you need to ask yourself why. Why have they gone sideways? And then dig deeper into that. Otherwise, you're going to end up spending a lot of money and probably wasting a lot of time without getting clear answers. So to highlight this, I want to share a quick case story from my private practice with a client who, for this example, we'll call him Sam. Sam struggled with a bunch of different complaints, things like dandruff, some acne, low energy, the inability to gain muscle mass, brain fog, and had some mild GI complaints. He'd seen a functional doctor who ran a lot of blood tests and did the Dutch test, which you may remember Dr. Carrie Jones talking about. It's a great test. It's a urine test to look at your hormones, by the way. The doctor couldn't make heads or tails of why he had all these symptoms based off of the blood labs and the Dutch test. And ultimately, Sam and the doctor did not get anywhere. Fortunately, Sam found me online, and when we chatted about his frustrations, I said, look, we really need to look at things from a more foundational level because I feel like we're too high up in this organ system hierarchy and missing a whole lot of key pieces underneath that actually feed into the hormone system. And Sam was completely on board with this. So I recommended that we do a stool test and an organic acid panel along with a few additional blood nutrient markers to help fill in some missing pieces to the puzzle. What we found was incredibly helpful. So first of all, Sam had a number of infections and a lot of dysbiosis going on in his microbiome. He had a number of nutrient deficiencies. He had digestive impairment, so he really wasn't breaking things down appropriately and absorbing them well. And his liver detox pathways, those phase 2 detox pathways I always talk about, were overwhelmed. And all of these issues just on their own can throw a wrench in hormone balance. He had a lot going on here, so we dove in, and fortunately, because we worked on these foundational issues, Sam began to see a significant improvement in many of his health complaints. The point of this story isn't to say, don't get your hormones tested. That's not what I'm saying. My intention is to actually help you take smarter actions, because I don't want to see you waste time, and I especially don't want to see you waste money, because all of these tests generally are out of pocket. And it can become very expensive when you start doing tests and labs essentially out of order. So doing a Dutch test first is probably not the best way to go. Because if you do have foundational issues and there's legitimate reason to suspect that, it's better to look at the foundation first and then decide later on, once you're seeing improvements and you're making headway, then invest in something like a hormone test or a hormone panel that allows you the ability to dive in deeper after the foundational issues are resolved. Sometimes just addressing the foundational issues can actually correct or rebalance the issues at the hormonal level, because the hormones are no longer being hijacked by a struggling foundation. That's why it's important, if you do work with a practitioner, to make sure that they look at you as a whole, complete system. They don't just take the one thing that they do really well and apply it to you. Because if that's the case, you could end up like a number of my clients, because Sam's story is not unique. That's why if you're not sure what's going on, or you're just going off of some sort of like quiz you saw online or a list of symptoms, and it sounds like you have estrogen dominance, for example, it's best to get some help to understand why the hormones are off, instead of rushing in to get that testing done and missing the bigger pieces that actually need to be addressed and supported initially before even spending the money on a test that is likely going to change depending on those foundational issues improving. So my recommendation and suggestion would be, if you believe that your hormones are off and you've got a lot of foundational issues that should be addressed, wait to do the hormone testing until you've addressed the foundational issues. That way you know exactly where things stand once the foundational issues are no longer standing in the way as an obstacle for the hormones. I really hope that you find this perspective both refreshing and practical, because I don't want to see you waste time, and I certainly don't want to see you waste any money. All the other episodes that I've mentioned here, as well as a link directly to the Dutch test, which I do use in my clinical practice, can be found over in the show notes at skinterrupt.com/119. There you can leave any questions and comments as well, so that we can keep the conversation going. If you have any friends that have questions about their hormones and are thinking about doing hormone testing, share this episode with them. That way, if they've got hormone issues, but hormone issues are being driven by something else, this hopefully will help them get at the root of the problem instead of spending money and time essentially spinning their wheels too high up in that hierarchy of systems that we discussed. And before you head off for your day, take a moment, rate and review the podcast, and then hit the subscribe button. That way the next episode lands on your mobile device without you having to do a thing. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. I appreciate you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.